Most people spend years trying to find the right words to say to a narcissist. The perfect explanation, the most logical argument, the most clearly stated boundary. What almost no one realizes is that the power was never in the words themselves. It was always in something else entirely. There is a fundamental misunderstanding that most people bring to the challenge of communicating with a narcissistic personality, one that causes them to invest enormous energy in exactly the wrong dimension of the interaction. They focus on what to say, when the entire dynamic turns on how it is delivered. What most people don't realize is that the narcissist's processing of any communication begins not with the content, but with an automatic, rapid assessment of the emotional register in which the content arrives. Before the specific words are evaluated, before the logic of the argument is engaged with, before the stated boundary is processed, the emotional charge of the delivery has already been read, categorized, and used to determine what kind of interaction this is and what tactical response it requires. High emotional charge signals, exploitable activation. Anger signals that the manipulation landed. Tears signal that the pressure is working. Even the carefully controlled voice of someone managing visible distress signals to the narcissist's calibration system that there is an internal state being managed, which means there is an internal state available to be targeted more precisely in the next move. This is where the language of consequence reveals its function, not in its content, though the content matters, but in what its delivery communicates about the speaker's relationship to their own internal state. A sentence delivered without emotional charge does not simply fail to provide the exploitable activation the narcissist was looking for. It communicates something about the internal state that produced the delivery, that whatever the narcissist did not produce the expected internal disruption. Pay attention to what that communication does to the narcissist's tactical assessment, because it forces a recalculation that high-charge responses never require. The high-charge response confirms the working model. It tells the narcissist system that the approach was effective, that this person can be reached through this mechanism, and that calibration refinement will continue to produce results. The low-charge delivery challenges the working model. It suggests that the assumption the tactic was built on, that this person can be emotionally activated through this approach, may need revision. Most people miss this warning sign because they are focused on the content of what they are saying. The hidden reason the delivery consistently outweighs the content in its effect on the narcissist's behavioral assessment is that the content was never the primary input the assessment was reading. The emotional register was. And the emotional register is determined not by what is said, but by what the speaker's internal state produces in the moment of delivery. There is a structural feature of most responses to narcissistic behavior that makes them, however well-intentioned and however clearly expressed, almost uniformly ineffective at producing the one outcome they were designed to produce. They invite engagement. What most people don't realize is that the narcissist's entire tactical system is built for engagement, calibrated, refined, and optimized through extensive experience to produce favorable outcomes from the specific kinds of responses that most people naturally produce when they are attempting to communicate something important to someone who is difficult to reach. The stated feeling invites invalidation. The explained reason invites counter-reasoning. The expressed hurt invites reframing. The declared boundary invites the specific negotiation process through which boundaries get tested, eroded, and eventually repositioned. Every response that contains emotional content, logical argument, or explanatory justification provides the narcissist system with material. And material in an adversarial dynamic is the resource from which the narcissist constructs their next move. The sentence that makes a narcissist think twice is specifically constructed to provide no material, not through coldness or deliberate withholding, but through the specific quality of a statement that is factual rather than emotional, observational rather than interpretive, and consequential rather than threatening. It does not say how the behavior felt. It says what the behavior was. It does not say what the behavior means about the narcissist's character. It says what will now occur as a result of the behavior. And it says both of these things in a register, so free of emotional charge and so devoid of implicit invitation to respond that the narcissist's engagement system encounters something it was never designed to efficiently process, a statement that requires nothing. Pay attention to what this structural feature does to the narcissist's response options. Because each of the narcissist's standard engagement responses requires something to engage with. The invalidation requires a feeling to invalidate. The counter-reasoning requires a reason to counter. The reversal requires an accusation to reverse. A factual observation of what occurred, delivered without emotional charge, provides none of these entry points. There is no feeling present to invalidate, only a description of what happened. There is no reasoning present to dismantle, only a statement of what will follow. There is no accusation present to reverse, only an observation stated as clearly and as neutrally as if the speaker were describing the weather. Most people miss this warning sign because the sentence that provides nothing to argue against feels in the moment of delivering it almost too simple to be effective. The hidden reason, its simplicity, is precisely what makes it effective, is that the narcissist system was built to handle complex emotional content. It was never optimized for the specific challenge of responding to something that contains no emotional content at all. There is a distinction that most people never consciously make in their communication with narcissistic personalities. A distinction so structurally significant that it determines, more than almost any other single variable, whether a stated limit will be respected or will simply become the opening position of a negotiation the speaker never intended to enter. The distinction between a consequence and a threat. What most people don't realize is that threats and consequences, while they may appear identical in content, produce entirely different responses in the narcissist's tactical system, because they communicate entirely different things about the internal state of the person delivering them. A threat communicates need. Specifically, it communicates the need for the narcissist's compliance, because a threat only matters if the person making it requires the other party to respond to it in a particular way. And need detected by the narcissist's assessment system is leverage. It tells the system that this person's emotional equilibrium is contingent on the outcome of this interaction, which means the outcome can be managed through the specific approaches that target emotional contingency. A consequence communicates something categorically different. It communicates that something will occur. Not if the narcissist agrees to it, not if the narcissist finds it acceptable, not if the conversation concludes in a particular way, but simply as the factual result of what has already happened or what continues to happen. The consequence does not require the narcissist's agreement. It does not invite their evaluation of its fairness. It does not depend on their participation in any form to become real. Pay attention to what the absence of need in the delivery of a consequence does to the narcissist's leverage assessment, because leverage requires something the target needs in order to function. Remove the need, and the leverage has nothing to operate against. This is where the removal of negotiating space completes what the consequence statement begins. Because most communication, even firm communication, contains implicit negotiating space. The unspoken acknowledgement that if the conversation goes a certain way, if the right response is produced, if sufficient pressure or sufficient charm is applied, the stated position might shift. The sentence that communicates a consequence without threading contains none of this implicit acknowledgement. It does not say, "This is my position subject to your response." It says, "This is what will occur," in a register that treats the matter as already decided rather than as currently under discussion. Most people miss this warning sign because statements that treat matters as already decided feel, in conversational context, almost impolite. The hidden reason this quality of finality is specifically what disrupts the narcissist negotiating system is that the system was built to operate in open conversational space. Close the space, and the system has nowhere to go. There is something about the way a sentence lands in an interaction with a narcissist that determines its effect more completely than the sentence's actual content. And this something is almost never what the person delivering the sentence is focused on in the moment of delivering it. They are focused on the words. The narcissist is focused on the delivery. What most people don't realize is that the narcissist's real-time processing of any communication involves two parallel evaluations happening simultaneously. The first evaluation processes the content. What is being said, what position it represents, what response it invites. The second evaluation processes the delivery, what the delivery reveals about the speaker's internal state, their confidence in what they are saying, their emotional investment in how the statement will be received, and their apparent dependency on the interaction proceeding in a particular direction. And in virtually every case, the second evaluation produces more strategically useful information than the first. Pay attention to what genuine delivery calm communicates to this second evaluation. Not the performance of calm, not the carefully controlled voice of someone managing visible emotional tension, but the specific quality of delivery that comes from a person whose internal state actually does not require this sentence to land in any particular way in order to remain stable. This quality is almost impossible to replicate through technique alone. It is the behavioral output of a genuine internal condition, the condition of someone who has already processed the situation completely enough that the delivery of the sentence is simply a statement of what is, rather than an attempt to produce a specific response from the person receiving it. The narcissist system detects this quality with a sensitivity that most people never develop in their social reading of others. Because the narcissist's operational security has always depended on accurately assessing whether the person across from them is operating from a position of genuine internal stability or from a position of managed emotional tension that strategic pressure can eventually reach, genuine delivery calm communicates the former. And the former is the specific internal condition that the narcissist's most reliable pressure tactics were never designed to work on. Most people miss this warning sign because the difference between genuine calm and performed calm is invisible at the level of words and visible only at the level of behavioral micro. Signals that most people never consciously read, but that the narcissist's assessment system has been reading automatically, continuously, and with considerable accuracy throughout every interaction of their relational life. This is where the absence of emotional investment as a power signal reveals its most counterintuitive dimension. Because most people believe that communication is most powerful when it carries maximum emotional investment, that the statement delivered with the greatest feeling will be received with the greatest weight. What most people don't realize is that in a dynamic with a narcissistic personality, the exact opposite is consistently true. The statement delivered without emotional investment in the narcissist's response, without the anxiety of someone who needs it to go a certain way, without the anger of someone who has been genuinely destabilized, without the hope of someone who requires understanding from the person they are addressing, communicates a quality of internal authority that emotionally charged delivery systematically undermines. Because emotional charge communicates that the outcome matters to the speaker, and outcome dependency is leverage. It tells the narcissist system that the speaker's equilibrium is contingent on what happens next, which means what happens next can be used to manage the speaker's state. The absence of emotional investment communicates something that most people are never explicitly told is a form of power, that the speaker's equilibrium does not require the outcome to go any particular way in order to remain intact. And an opponent who cannot be destabilized through outcome management is an opponent whose system of control has just lost its most fundamental operating lever. There is a dimension of the narcissist's behavioral system that most people never consider when they think about how to communicate in ways that produce genuine change in the dynamic. And it is the dimension that ultimately determines whether a single interaction has lasting consequences or simply gets absorbed into the existing pattern without altering anything about what follows. The behavioral model update. What most people don't realize is that the narcissist maintains a continuously updated internal model of every person in their environment, a working assessment of what each person produces in response to specific approaches, what pressure is effective with them, what emotional channels are most accessible, and how much investment their targeting requires relative to the return it produces. This model is not static. It updates based on received information, and a single interaction that produces genuinely unexpected results, results that the existing model specifically predicted would not occur, triggers a model update that persists beyond the interaction itself. Pay attention to what this means for the lasting effect of a single calmly delivered sentence. Because most people assume that one interaction, however well executed, cannot produce lasting change in a dynamic that was built across months or years of consistent pattern. The hidden reason this assumption is wrong is structural. The narcissist model of any specific person is continuously updated based on what interactions with that person produce. One interaction that produces a categorically unexpected result. Calm where activation was predicted. Consequence where emotional charge was expected. Finality where negotiating space was assumed does not simply disrupt the interaction. It installs doubt in the model. And doubt in a model that was previously confident produces a specific behavioral adjustment in every subsequent interaction. The specific caution of a system that has learned, through unexpected experience, that its previous assessment of this particular person may need revision. This is where the pattern interruption function reveals its most lasting strategic consequence. The narcissist's scripts, the sequences of action, and expected reaction that were refined through consistent patterns of previous interactions were written for a specific version of this person. The version the model had accurately predicted. Most people miss this warning sign because they don't realize that the script exists until they do something the script didn't anticipate. And the sentence delivered with genuine calm, genuine consequence, and genuine absence of emotional investment does exactly that. Not by fighting the script, not by refusing to participate in it, but by simply failing to produce the reaction the script required to advance to its next line. The script stops, the model updates, and the next interaction begins from a different baseline than all the interactions that preceded it. When you examine the complete picture, the language of consequence that removed emotional charge as the primary data the narcissist assessment system was reading, the tone carrying more weight than content, and communicating internal stability before a single word was processed. The sentence constructed to provide nothing to argue against. The factual observation that eliminated the subjective content that reframing requires, the consequence distinguished from the threat by the specific absence of need that threats always contain, the negotiating space removed by treating the matter as already decided rather than currently under discussion. The delivery revealing a genuine internal condition that pressure tactics were never designed to reach. The absence of emotional investment communicating the specific form of authority that emotional charge systematically undermines. The pattern interruption that stopped the script at the precise point where the expected reaction failed to appear. And the lasting behavioral model update that changed the baseline for every subsequent interaction. What becomes visible is something that the search for the right words, pursued across years of difficult communication with a narcissistic personality, consistently failed to find the power was never in the words. It was in what the delivery of the words communicated about the internal state of the person producing them. The specific, genuine, behaviorally expressed quality of someone whose equilibrium does not require the interaction to go a particular way, whose consequence does not need the narcissist's agreement to become real, whose observation requires no emotional charge because it is simply accurate, whose sentence requires no follow-up because it was never an invitation. What most people don't realize is that this quality cannot be performed. It can only be possessed, built through the specific internal work of arriving at a place where the narcissist's response genuinely no longer determines the speaker's internal state. That is the one sentence, not in its words, in what it reveals about the person who delivers it. And the narcissist, reading the delivery before the content, understands immediately that something has changed.